So there was some exciting action on the racetrack over the weekend. We're going to look forward to Belmont at Saratoga in a little bit, but there were some major performances to note on the racetrack. One across the pond that I think gets a lot of people buzzing. City of Troy, colt by Justify, who won the Epsom Derby, as they say, over the weekend. And it was a really thrilling race, in part because there was a loose horse in front, and thankfully, like, everybody was okay. But they basically had to, Ryan Moore and City of Troy basically had to run behind the loose horse through the stretch. And shout out to both of them for being brave. Neither one of them like stopped or steadied or anything. They just kept running. See, that's what you got to do, I think, when there's a loose horse in the race. As dangerous as it is, you still got to ride it as if the horse isn't in the race, as if you would normally do, unless it's an extreme circumstance where the horse is veering all over the place, obviously. And that's how they rode that horse. And what's interesting about him, in addition to him now being, I think, 4 for 5 or 5 for 6 with multiple Group 1 winner, bounced back off a poor performance to start his 3-year-old season. But the lads at Coolmore, as they say, are considering sending him for the Travers, which would be super exciting. And they've done it already with Mendelssohn. If you remember Mendelssohn running in the Travers, running a really good second to Catholic Boy. He was a similar horse that had dirt/turf pedigree, son of Scat Daddy. This horse is obviously a son of Justify, who is a son of Scat Daddy. And Coolmore guys are never afraid to take chances. And I mean, how valuable would this horse be to be an Epsom Derby winner and a Travers Stakes winner? I think we have the pedigree too, courtesy of sponsors, Arian Pedigrees, that we can throw up right now. And you can see he's out of a Galileo mare, who's a Group 1 winner for Coolmore, but has that dirt on the top half of the pedigree. You know, and especially I haven't seen, I'm not clued into European racing every single week, admittedly, but I haven't seen too many horses impress me more than that. And especially with Auguste Rodin starting the season with a pretty, subpar performance in Dubai, or was it Saudi? I forget. Those two both mixed together in my mind now. He might be the most exciting turf horse in the world right now. And if he's able to come over, I think that should be, to me, there's nothing more exciting on the horizon than potentially an Epsom Derby winner coming to the Travers, and who might just be the best turf horse in the world. John, what are your thoughts?
Well, there's a couple things that immediately came to mind when I watched that race, Joe. And first and foremost, City of Troy is the first U.S.-born winner of the Epsom Derby. So that's an accomplishment unto itself, because they don't bring very many horses over there. This was a homebred of Coolmore and the lads, as you said, and they thought enough of him to bring him home and win the Epsom Derby. And all the horse did before that was, he was champion 2-year-old in Europe, champion 2-year-old colt in Great Britain and in Ireland last year. Right. As you mentioned, 4 wins in 5 races. And for the most part, you would say that the English and the Irish are pretty buttoned up when it comes to excitement and enthusiasm. But let me just read to you a couple of quotes that I thought were really interesting, coming from Aidan O'Brien, the trainer of City of Troy. Number one, he said, just in general, Justifies our Galileos with more class. I mean, that was
high praise.
That was quote number one. Quote number 2 by Aidan O'Brien was, Ryan Moore, his regular rider, gave City of Troy an incredible ride. We knew that the Guineas went totally wrong. I made mistakes training him, and that's the bottom line. Since then, everything has been beautiful, and he really grew up. I mean, how many times have you heard a trainer say, you know what, I screwed up. It wasn't the horse. It wasn't the rider. It wasn't, the conditions. I screwed up. I've made a mistake, and I'm admitting that. And he said that before the race too. So it wasn't like he was like, I made a mistake, but look how smart I am.
I screwed up and still beat y'all.
Yeah, exactly. No, he was really good. He talked about the fact, as you mentioned, that the lads had it in their head that he could go to Saratoga, he being the horse, of course. And that this is Aidan O'Brien's 10th Derby victory, all of them since 2001. And he said that this was the best horse he's ever had that won an Epsom Derby. So, I mean, that in itself was really amazing. One more quote that I thought was pretty funny. Okay. And that's the owners of the second place horse, Ambient Friendly. And they asked him, what are you going to do with the horse, next time out? And the Greedleys, the Greedley family, the one that owns Ambient Friendly, said, we're lucky and privileged to own a horse like him, and we'll basically go wherever City of Troy isn't.
Right. Yeah.
I was hysterically laughing at a lot of these quotes. I mean, just, they're very just factual. There's no, it didn't go through the marketing group. It didn't go through the HR. It's like, this is the way we feel about all this stuff, and this is what we're saying. And it was a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's just honesty because I'm sure there are tons of owners and trainers all across the world who think like that and plot like that every single day. I'll give you an example. Like West Point has Jackson Traveler, who we're lucky enough to win a graded stakes earlier this year with. But there's a monster in the Steve Asmussen barn in Oaklawn named Skelly.
Right.
And that was our plan with him. Like, we'll go wherever Skelly is not.
Right.
Because, there's just certain horses where you're running for second place no matter who you got.
Right.
And it's good when then there's some forthrightness about those plans, because that's really how it works a lot of times. You got to pick your spots when there's a dominant horse in the division. And clearly City of Troy is that dominant horse. Speaking of West Point Thoroughbreds, big win on Saturday for the home team. Much, much deserved for Cugino and the Audubon Stakes. Shout out to my boy John Green. It was very classy. They were in the race and immediately texted me congratulations. Cugino had been, I think, very unlucky so far this year. He had run second a couple times. He had to close into a 22-second last quarter in the Gulfstream race full of speed. They went 25 and 50, and he came home in like 21 and change, just missed by a neck. If you watch the Appalachian, like he made the early move down the backstretch, wore down the favorite Charlie Appleby horse, was clear in the stretch, and just got nailed by on the inside by a Rob Atras horse at the wire. He deserved a stakes win. And you know what I loved about that race, John? It's a subtle thing in racing, but I've seen him do it twice now with our horses, and I know he does it all over the place with other people's horses. Flavien Prat let the horse do his thing. And Cugino was not a front runner. He had never gone to the lead before. And that was part of like what had held him back, is he was dependent on the pace in front of him to be able to win races. And the horse broke great. He had an inside draw, and Flavien said, okay, I got a good horse. Catch me if you can. He did it with Ohana Honor a couple of races ago, who went wire to wire in a Keeneland mile-and-a-half marathon turf race. Same thing. Horse had never gone to the lead before, broke great from the rail. Flavien went to the front and just kept on going. There's just so many riders and so many trainers, and you've heard me say this before, that just overthink these turf races, and they rate the horses back too much, and they waste the horses' energy fighting them to make sure they don't go to the lead. And I understand the rationale behind it to begin with. Like, turf racing is all about the last quarter mile, so you don't want to go too fast, too early. It's not like dirt racing where it's a tiring surface and everyone is retreating to a certain extent at the end, just some slower than others. Turf racing, I don't care. I want position. Kendrick Carmouche has made a living of riding horses like that in turf sprints and turf routes in New York. When other riders are petrified of the lead, he says, fine, I'll take it. Shout out to Flavien. The horse won by 4 1/4 lengths, got a 91 buyer, one of the top horses in the 3-year-old turf division, of course, until Charlie Appleby sends another monster over. Like, that's similar to your point, John, what you were saying about the runner-up connections to City of Troy. Like, we got a lot of good turf horses in the barn, and it's just so tiring opening the PPs and seeing like another Charlie Appleby horse, and like one I'd never heard of before. It's like a new one every single time, and it's just he's just so dominant when he ships over here. But for now, to me, Cugino is the king of the hill, and that was a really impressive performance.
No, and it really was a tip of the cap to all the people you mentioned. Flavien recognized that he could get to the front and took it over, and also for that's not necessarily the style of a rider like him, that would immediately go to the front and keep going. But it proved itself to be the absolute winning connection. And should we be surprised at all that a Shug McGahee horse is really starting to come into hand after his 6th start? I mean, that's really, that's kind of right from his playbook, is that the first couple starts, the horse ran really well, but ultimately continued to develop and grow. And one other thing that I think is important to notice is that, the Kentucky stakes calendar, and you and I, rail on this all the time about how come there weren't any Kentucky, stake races that were downgraded this year. And the home team always seems to get the nod when it comes to making decisions on that. But one thing they're doing really, really well with this 3-year-old turf group is they have the Transylvania at Keeneland opening weekend. Then they have the American Turf on Derby weekend at Churchill. And then 4 weeks later, they have the Audubon, which, again, I really think if you look at this group and you look at last year's group and the year before, I can't imagine why the Audubon wouldn't be a graded stake race next year. It just has a lot of these horses that go into this race graduate and go on to other things and earn other stake wins and other black type. And it's a $275,000 stake race now. It's not like it's a, it's a little podunk, I hate to say podunk $75,000 added or something like that, but it's got the legitimate purse also. So I really think that that I don't know if it's coordinated or not. I'd like to think it is, but Keeneland Churchill Downs did a really good job with this division of stacking these races 4 weeks apart. And it looks like a lot of the same horses run against each other, and they turn the tables on each other all the time, which again shows to the depth of this 3-year-old group. Joe, I'm assuming that Cugino is going to go. Speaking of race series, he's going to go now to New York and run in the Belmont and the Saratoga Derbies. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean that's what I've heard. That's the loose plan. Like you were saying, Suge is one of those guys who's not going to commit to a race 2 days after the horse comes out. He wants to see how they train for a week or two. But yes, that's the next big goal for him is the Belmont Derby. It's going to be so weird being at Aqueduct July 4th weekend.
Yeah, right.
For those kind of races. But I think the other great thing was that he went a mile and an eighth, which he never gone that far before, and he was kicking away at the end.
Right.
So you got to think a mile and a quarter, or I guess it's going to be a mile 3/16 at Aqueduct, is going to be right up his alley. Also, correction, it was the Transylvania, the Appalachian is the race for fillies. But yeah, it's a good series of races. And I also just want to give a shout out to the Dam of Cugino, Adorable Miss, who's had 3 foals so far, and all 3 are 6-figure earners. There's another one that we have, Battle of Normandy, who's a nice horse, and then she's got Veronica Green, who's a nice horse for Chad Brown as well. So she's a really good, exploding broodmare, I think. That's going to get more and more valuable and have more.
So before this win, like Cugino was like the redheaded stepchild, basically, of that group. I mean, he really that's tough when you have big siblings that can go on and do what they've been doing.
Yeah, no, but he proved his mettle for sure. And Cugino, if you don't know, is Italian for cousin. So shout out to my paisan, my paisan Cugino and all the partners. And that was a fun one because like I said, he had been knocking on the door and I felt like he deserved a stakes win. So we'll see what he does the rest of the year. One other performance I wanted to mention, just because he got a really big buyer, Happy Jack in the Triple Bend over the weekend at Santa Anita. He had been on the Derby Trail briefly last year and kind of fallen off a little bit. Got a 105 in winning the Triple Bend.
Wow.
That's another division where other than Scaly, it's like, who do you want in there? So for Doug O'Neill, that might be an interesting. Doug O'Neill does this a lot. This horse is by Oxbow. Like he gets these horses from these kind of obscure sires and gets them to show up on big days like that. Great weekend of racing. And as we turn the page to Belmont at Saratoga and Saratoga, there's gonna be so much more to look forward to. And we'll be here to break it all down for you all summer.